I will prove that I am not the hypocrite and the liar you think me. You will not trust me, but I will trust you." I looked up into her eyes, and knew a pagan joy when they faltered before my searching gaze. She threw herself upon her knees beside me, and the faint, exquisite perfume inseparable from my memories of her became perceptible, and seemed as of old to intoxicate me. The lock clicked, and I was free. Karamaneh rose swiftly to her feet as I stood upright and outstretched my cramped arms. For one delirious moment her bewitching face was close to mine, and the dictates of madness almost ruled. But I clenched my teeth and turned sharply aside. I could not trust myself to speak. With Fu-Manchu's marmoset again gambolling before us, she walked through the curtained doorway into the room beyond. It was in darkness, but I could see the slave girl in front of me, a slim silhouette, as she walked to a screened window, and opening the screen in the manner of a folding door, also threw open the window. "Look," she whispered. I crept forward and stood beside her. I found myself looking down into Museum Street from a first floor window! Belated traffic still passed along New Oxford Street on the left, but not a solitary figure was visible to the right as far as I could see, and that was nearly to the railings of the museum. Immediately opposite, in one of the flats which I had noticed earlier in the evening, another window was opened. I turned, and in the reflected light saw Karamaneh held a cord in her hand. Our eyes met in the semi-darkness. She began to haul the cord into the window, and, looking upward, I perceived that it was looped in some way over the telegraph cables which crossed the street at that point. It was a slender cord, and it appeared to be passed across the joint in the cables almost immediately above the center of the roadway. As it was hauled in, a second and stronger line attached to it was pulled, in turn, over the cables, and thence in by the window. Karamaneh twisted a length of it around a metal bracket fastened in the wall, and placed a light wooden crossbar in my hand. "Make sure that there is no one in the street," she said, craning out and looking to right and left. "Then swing across. The length of a rope is just sufficient to enable you to swing through the open window opposite, and there is a mattress inside to drop upon. But release the bar immediately, or you may be dragged back. The door of the room in which you will find yourself is unlocked, and you have only to walk down the stairs and out into the street." I peered at the crossbar in my hand, then looked hard at the girl beside me. I missed something of the old fire of her nature. She was very subdued to-night. "Thank you, Karamaneh," I said softly. She suppressed a little cry as I spoke her name, and drew back into the shadows. "I believe you are my friend," I said, "but I cannot understand. Won't you help me to understand?" I took her unresisting hand and drew her toward me. My very soul seemed to thrill at the contact of her lithe body. She was trembling wildly, and seemed to be trying to speak, but although her lips framed the words, no sound followed. Suddenly comprehension came to me. I looked down into the street, hitherto deserted, and into the upturned face of Fu-Manchu. Wearing a heavy fur-collared coat, and with his yellow, malignant countenance grotesquely horrible beneath the shade of a large tweed motor cap, he stood motionless, looking up at me. That he had seen me, I could not doubt, but had he seen my companion? In a choking whisper Karamaneh answered my unspoken question. "He has not seen me. I have done much for you. Do in return a small thing for me. Save my life." She dragged me back from the window and fled across the room to the weird laboratory where I had lain captive. Throwing herself upon the divan, she held out her white wrists and glanced significantly at the manacles. "Lock them upon me," she said rapidly. "Quick! Quick!" Great as was my mental disturbance, I managed to grasp the purpose of this device. The very extremity of my danger found me cool. I fastened the manacles, which so recently had confined my own wrists, upon the slim wrists of Karamaneh. A faint and muffled disturbance, doubly ominous because there was nothing to proclaim its nature, reached me from some place below on the ground floor. "Tie something around my mouth," directed Karamaneh with nervous rapidity, and as I began to look about me, "Tear a strip from my dress," she said. "Do not hesitate. Be quick! Be quick!" I seized the flimsy muslin and tore off half a yard or so from the hem of the skirt. The voice of Dr. Fu Manchu became audible. He was speaking rapidly, sibilantly, and evidently was approaching, would be upon me in a matter of moments. I fastened the strip of fabric over the girl's mouth and tied it behind, experiencing a pang, half pleasurable and half fearful, as I found my hands in contact with the foamy luxuriance of her hair. Dr. Fu-Manchu was entering the room immediately beyond. Snatching up the bunch of keys, I turned and ran, for in another instant my retreat would be cut off. As I burst once more into the darkened room, I became aware that a door on the further side of it was open, and framed in the opening was the tall, high-shouldered figure of the Chinaman, still enveloped in his fur coat and wearing the grotesque cap. As I saw him, so he perceived me, and as I sprang to the window he advanced. I turned desperately and hurled the bunch of keys with all my force into the dimly seen face. Either because they possessed a chatoyant quality of their own, as I had often suspected, or by reason of the light reflected through the open window, the green eyes gleamed upon me vividly like those of a giant cat. One short, guttural exclamation paid tribute to the accuracy of my aim. Then I had the crossbar in my hand. I threw one leg across the sill, and, dire as was my extremity, hesitated for an instant ere trusting myself to the flight. A vice-like grip fastened upon my left ankle. Hazily I became aware that the dark room was flooded with figures. The whole yellow gang were upon me, the entire murder group composed of units recruited from the darkest place of the East. I have never counted myself a man of resource, and have always envied Nayland Smith his possession of that quality, in him extraordinarily developed, but on this occasion the gods were kind to me, and I resorted to the only device perhaps which could have saved me. Without releasing my hold upon the crossbar, I clutched at the ledge with the fingers of both hands and swung back into the room my right leg, which was already across the sill. With all my strength I kicked out. My heel came in contact, in sickening contact, with a human head, beyond doubt that I had split the skull of the man who held me. The grip upon my ankle was released automatically, and now consigning all my weight to the rope, I slipped forward, as a diver, across the broad ledge and found myself sweeping through the night like a winged thing. The line, as Karamaneh had assured me, was of well-judged length. Down I swept to within 6 or 7 feet of the street level, then up, at ever decreasing speed, toward the vague oblong of the open window beyond. I hope I have been successful, in some measure, in portraying the varied emotions which it was my lot to experience that night, and it may well seem that nothing more exquisite could remain for me. Yet it was written otherwise, for as I swept up to my goal, describing the inevitable arc which I had no power to check, I saw that one awaited me. Crouching forward, half out of the open window, was a Burmese dacoit, a cross-eyed, leering being whom I well remembered to have encountered 2 years before in my dealings with Dr. Fu-Manchu. One bare, sinewy arm held rigidly at right angles before his breast, he clutched a long, curved knife and waited for the critical moment when my throat should be at his mercy. I have said that a strange coolness had come to my aid; even now it did not fail me, and so incalculably rapid are the workings of the human mind that I remember complimenting myself upon an achievement which Smith himself could not have bettered, and this in the immeasurable interval which intervened between the commencement of my upward swing and my arrival on a level with the window. I threw my body back and thrust my feet forward. As my legs went through the opening, an acute pain in one calf told me that I was not to escape scatheless from the night's melee. But the dacoit went rolling over in the darkness of the room, as helpless in face of that ramrod stroke as the veriest infant. Back I swept upon my trapeze, a sight to have induced any passing citizen to question his sanity. With might and main I sought to check the swing of the pendulum, for if I should come within reach of the window behind, I doubted not that other knives awaited me. It was no difficult feat, and I succeeded in checking my flight. Swinging there above Museum Street, I could even appreciate, so lucid was my mind, the ludicrous element of the situation. I dropped. My wounded leg almost failed me, and, greatly shaken, but with no other serious damage, I picked myself up from the dust of the roadway. It was a mockery of fate that the problem which Nayland Smith had set me to solve should have been solved thus.